Welcome to the Farming Without the Bank podcast, the show with a no BS approach to money, hosted by a farm strategy expert and authorized IBC practitioner. Join us as we get real and expose the flaws of traditional financial institutions in order to help farmers take control of their finances, create peace of mind, grow their wealth, and leave a legacy. Now, here's your host, Mary Jo Irmen.
Hello. How are you guys today or this episode? I forget that some of you binge listen, and so some of you are caught up and some of you have a ways to go. Or you're picking and choosing, which is just fine by me. When I listen to podcasts, I do that as well. Either way, thank you for being here. Today, we are going to talk about how Nelson got started, how he got all of his debt paid off, why he had 49 life insurance policies, and how he did that. I talk about this a lot in my meetings, but I have not ever addressed it on the podcast. And I've had some people suggest that this would be a good podcast episode. So here we go. You guys, first, before we start, if you are enjoying these podcasts, please share them. I really would appreciate that, or leave a review. That would even be equally as awesome. Okay, so, Nelson says in his book, for those of you that have read Nelson's book, he had $500,000 of land debt at 23% interest. And he talks about how he got all of that paid off in 13 years. And he was outside of the banking system. And so, first of all, let's even be more clear on the fact that what Nelson did not tell us in his book is that he inherited $300,000 of extra debt from a business partner that could not pay. And so Nelson really paid off $800,000 of debt in that time. And I really think it's astronomical because if you think about it, we have a $500,000 mortgage and we don't pay that thing off for 30 years, right? Or we have credit card debt and it takes us forever to get that paid off. I've seen people who have credit card debt and they move it over to a personal loan and we're looking at, 10 years and maybe 20 grand. And even your credit card debt is at the same interest rate that Nelson, or less usually, but can be at the same interest rate that Nelson was paying to the banks. And so when we say he paid off, as he calls them, the snakes and dragons, he paid them off, but he had loans on his life insurance. So what he did is he moved the debt from the bank to his own personal banking system, as he calls it, and where he can control that debt. And it was at 5, 6, and 8%, or 5 to 8% is what he says in the book. And so if he has control, then he could decide how long it takes him to get that paid back. How long it took him to get it paid back into his life insurance, I have no idea. No idea. But when we're going from 23% interest to anything from 5 to 8, and you have control of that, that's fantastic. But how, on God's green earth, did that man start 49 policies and have all of that debt paid off? Well, if you guys read his book, and if you've listened to my previous podcasts, we talked about Parkinsons Law. You have to beat Parkinsons Law. He talks about it in the book several times. Most of us do not want to do this. Therefore, we get to continue to complain about being broke, being at the banker's, beck and call. They're getting to control us because we're choosing to not be Parkinson's Law. And to get the full episode of Parkinson's Law, you can go back to that podcast. But in a nutshell, Parkinson's Law is our needs rise to meet our income. So if you're making more money, all of a sudden you're spending more money, creating more debt, not saving it. So what Nelson says is, if you have extra money, put it away so that you can use it to pay down those expenses. And what Nelson did is he ran them all that extra money, anything extra he had, he ran it through a policy first, borrowed against the policy, paid off the bank or paid down the bank, and then just moved that money over into his own policy as a payback, okay? Or move that debt into his own policy, I should say. So many of us say, well, I want to get away from the bank, but I don't want to do anything different. Well, then nothing different's going to happen. You're just going to keep doing the same thing over and over and over, which is insanity, right? If we don't want to be frugal for a period of time, does that mean that we have to be frugal the rest of our life and never have anything? No. It just means to get out of debt and to maybe get away from the banking system, we have to do that for a short time. But we're choosing not to do that. We're choosing to say, well, I want what Nelson had, but I don't want to do what Nelson did. It doesn't work that way, my friends. Does not work that way. You need to do something different in order to get a different result. And so if you're running money through a policy and every extra dollar that you have, and you are not, I repeat, you are not spending it and going to buy something different, you can start another policy. Nelson was also paying himself back at 23% interest, right? Because he was paying the bank 23% interest. So when he's paying it back to his life insurance policy, why wouldn't he pay it back at 23% interest and be an honest banker? So what do we do with the extra interest? If the insurance company is only charging 5%, what do we do with the extra? Goes back into the policy as premium. Again, more money going into a policy, having to start a new policy. Well, who are these policies on? Himself, his wife, his kids, his in-laws, his business partners. He insured all kinds of people, not just himself. And we have to keep in mind, Nelson was uninsurable because he had heart issues. And so if he's uninsurable, he had to find other lives. He even had his great-grandkids insured. So if you are thinking, man, I really want to get away from the bank and I'm really sick of their control, what are you willing to give up to put money into a policy? I talked to one young man at one point, and he is now a client. And I said, he said something about, we were talking about how much premium to pay. And I said, well, how much beer do you drink on the weekends? Oh, a lot. He's like, you'd be surprised how much money I spend there. I'm like, yeah, probably not. And I said, you probably going to the bar, right? Yep. Well, okay, if you're going to the bar drinking and you add some shots on there, how much money have we wasted? You're the one that gets to decide. Do I want to get away from the bank and build this system so down the road I can have more? Or is it better to have that beer and the shots and the visit to the bar every single weekend, Friday night and Saturday night? Can I just cut back? Do I want to just stop? I have some clients, some young clients who just don't go because they want to save the money. What means more to you? If you want to go to the bar and drink, great, go to the bar and drink. I don't care what you do. But then don't complain that you don't have any money to get away from the bank, or you don't have money to buy land when it comes for sale. If we're not willing to beat Parkinsons Law, as Nelson says, we are not going to be one step ahead of our peers. If all we do is beat Parkinsons Law, that's all we have to do, we will always be one step ahead of our peers because they're not willing to do it. So if you want to buy land, if you want to have a piece of equipment, if you want to expand and have cows, Can we beat Parkinson's Law? And some of you might say, I don't have any room, Mary Jo. I already can't go to the bar. Then stop saying I can't and start asking, how can I? And I've done an episode on this as well. This absolutely drives me crazy when people say, well, I can't have that. Really? It's that easy? You're just going to say, I can't have that? You're not going to at least sit down and say, well, how can I get this? How can I have this? And this is a mentality thing of listening to the good old talking heads of finance out there in the world who say, well, you live by your envelope, and when it's all gone, it's all gone. You can't do anything else. You can't go out to eat because that envelope is empty. You can't have that car because you don't have enough money to have that car. Tell me where these people are actually challenging us to say, how can I have that car? How can I go out to eat? How can I buy that land? How can I get those cows? How can I expand my operation? Think about it. You are asking the wrong question. And as soon as you say, I can't, you can't. And you won't. Because it's too hard. I am naturally frugal by nature. I always have been. I don't think it was something that was instilled in me. My parents are not super frugal, but I always have been. And I am more than happy to give up something today so I can have it later and see the long-term vision of this. And maybe that is why I understand infinite banking so well, because most people see the short term of it. If you don't agree with infinite banking, most likely you're not thinking long term. And you look at the numbers short term and say, oh, well, this doesn't work. Long term? It's a long-term thing, right? And Nelson knew long term, if I can get my debt into my control, I can pay it back whenever I want, and I don't have the bank breathing down my neck. All I have to pay is interest on that loan. I don't have to give up my real estate. Because remember, he had real estate. So he didn't have to give up his real estate. He could pay interest only and hold it and sell it when he needed to. Are we thinking long term? Are we willing to beat Parkinson's Law? Are we willing to move debt to the policy? Is that the smartest thing to do? Right? Interest rates are really low today compared to what they were then. There's a few changes in thought process around that, unless you want the control of that debt. But keep in mind when people say, and this drives me absolutely bonkers, when people say, oh, you're debt free, we'll get this paid off right away. When I started in this industry, that's how I was trained. Oh, you're going to be debt free. We'll get that debt paid off in 13 years and you're debt free. No, you're not. You still have a policy loan. Remember? And Nelson talks about in his book as well, that if you have a policy loan, you better be paying it back. And in my book, you're going to see at retirement, Nelson's book too, he shows at retirement that we're borrowing against a policy and not paying it back. That's retirement. That is not, oh, I'm going to go continue to buy things in my life. And I'm going to continue to build a business and build an operation and whatever it is that you're doing. But keep in mind, if you're looking at how he started, you're going to have to change what you're doing. You're going to have to change spending, or you're going to have to ask a better question. How do I create more money? Do I custom farm? Do I sell equipment that I don't need? I mean, think about how much equipment you have sitting around that you maybe just don't need. I had a gentleman the other day that said, you know, Mary Jo, your podcast got me thinking, and I'm selling the equipment I don't need. And now the neighbors have rumors that things aren't going so well for me. But what's he doing? He's selling equipment that he does not need, and he's paying off some debt with it. He is hiring a neighbor guy to do some custom farming for him because he doesn't have the time to do it, and he doesn't need to have $100,000 piece of equipment to do it and have that payment. let the neighbor guy have that payment. As long as it gets done and it gets done on time and right, what does it matter who does it? If the cash flow makes sense, think about it. Does every neighbor need to have the same piece of equipment? If you are not big enough to be able to afford that piece of equipment, hire the neighbor guy to come over and do it. And so everybody thinks he's crazy because he's selling stuff. Even his dad is like, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to sell stuff so I have some cash, right? Get out of debt. Get away from the banks. And what's the neighbor guy doing? Custom farming. He's got the piece of equipment. He's got the time. Why not custom farm it for somebody else? Make a little extra money that you're not carrying the debt on so you can pay for your piece of equipment. Or you can start a policy to get away from the banking system and start creating your own bank. Where can you get the money? And do we want to move it over to a policy so that you have control? I have clients who could care less that the insurance company is charging more money than the bank. Absolutely do not care. They moved all of their debt over to the policy so they have control of it. They would much rather pay 4.76% than 2% because they have control. They don't know if income's going to be steady or not. And if that makes you sleep better at night, go for it. That made Nelson sleep better at night. He didn't care what the interest rates are. It was about control of that money. And that is what this is about. Liquidity, control, and guarantees. And I say that all the time as well. So if you're asking, how did Nelson get started? How did he get 49 life insurance policies? That's how. Paid himself back more interest, used that money to start a policy, and ran as much money through these policies as he could. That makes sense. And it took a lifetime to do it. Well, half of his life. He didn't start till he was in his mid-50s, early 50s. So don't think this is going to happen overnight. It's a long-term thing. It took him 13 years. And yes, he sacrificed for those 13 years and figured out how to make some extra income to put it through the policies without having to sell the land. He didn't snap his fingers, people. I wish it was that easy. Nothing is that easy, but we have to start asking how. Just start asking how. Stop complaining. Stop wondering when life is going to change. You need to make it change. It's up to you. Move the control to yourself and get started. If you have read my book and you have not called to schedule an appointment, why? You are getting emails with links to my calendar. Go ahead and get scheduled so we can see how this can work for you. Until then, you're just going to keep doing the exact same thing. If you have got my book from somebody else and you've read it, then email us at maryjo@withoutthebank.com and we are happy to get you the link to schedule your appointment. I am not booking out 6 weeks anymore, so get on the calendar so that we can get you in and get this started. Because if you don't, you're insane. That's the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. That is not my medical diagnosis. That is just the definition of insanity. So anyway, all right. Thank you guys for tuning in. I very much appreciate it. Please leave a review, share this with friends. You guys would be amazed how many of your neighbors are most likely listening to me. I'm just saying it happens. If you need anything, you know where we're at. Just drop us an email. Happy to help, happy to answer any questions. You just let us know how we can help you. You guys have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will see you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Farming Without the Bank podcast. We hope today's episode has inspired you to take control of your finances in new ways. Don't forget to check out our website, farmingwithoutthebank.com, and engage with us on our Facebook page, Farming Without the Bank. Join us next week as we smash more financial myths and empower you to accomplish your financial goals.